It has become much better to be a bike lawyer because more people are riding bicycles, but there are some things that are important for people to do for our participatory democracy, so that when people have to go to court to enforce their rights, such as when they're hurt in a bike accident, the people who they see in the jury box are truly a cross-section of the community, because that's what our rights are. And what that means is that anybody here could probably find a number of reasons that they would be able to get out of jury duty. But if people who are busy get out of jury duty, what happens is that the people who are going into jury duty are people who really don't have anything better to do. And you don't want people on a jury who really are there because they're hoping something more interesting than what they have in their life is going to happen to them. You really want to go in there and bring in your own wisdom and your own good ideas. And it's important, to the extent that some of you are bicycle riders, that you bring that experience in too, because it's very difficult as a bicyclist to go into court and have a group of jurors who have not ridden bicycles since they were 12 years old looking back at you and thinking that you're some kind of a freak. So it's very important, I think, for jury duty, for you to do that part of joining our culture. And the other thing is that as bicycle riders, if you can know what your rights are, it helps all of us, because it makes it so that, just like the equestrians before us, we have our voices heard perhaps in larger, a higher volume than perhaps our numbers might otherwise suggest. And the fact is that even though there are a lot of us now, we're still a minority in numbers on the roadway. And also, if you consider the laws of physics, you know, the fact is that we are lightweight and we don't go real fast. So sometimes when we encounter hard objects like motor vehicles and roadside obstructions, we're the ones who lose out. So we need to be organized and follow some of the paths that the folks in the civil rights movements teach us, and that is that we want to be aware of our rights and be advocating. And if you join you know, the kinds of things that are going on in the city of Eugene that are being put on this month, join the BTA, the Bicycle Transportation Alliance, which is Oregon's bicycle advocacy organization. What you can do is join with us so that when things are coming up for a vote, or the legislature is considering certain things, you can help us by lending your shoulder behind these efforts, by sending emails, calling your Congress people and letting them know, so that the bicycle perspective is something that's heard. And one of the nice things about being in bicycle advocacy these days is that so many people consider themselves bicyclists. I mean, in the old days it used to be that everybody would sort of identify with motorists, and the bicyclists were kind of like these freaks who were somewhat trespassers on the roadways. But now when we go in, whether the legislators we're talking to are R's or D's, a lot of times they'll start talking about how they wish it was that their kids or their grandkids could ride their bikes to school like we did when we were kids. But everybody's afraid to get out of their cars in the neighborhoods now. And for those of you who are, you know, graduated before 1970 from high school, you remember how it was that most kids, most of the times, rode their bikes or walked to school. But now the neighborhoods are not considered safe enough by the parents to let the kids get out of the car. So, you know, the direction of the world, as you know, I mean, it's preaching to the choir, is in the direction of humans using their bodies again. You know, I mean, we've basically improved our world to the point where we can make it so that we don't have to use our bodies to really do anything. I mean, everything is a servo motor or an electronic instrument. What we have to do now is make it so that we find activities of daily living that can involve physical effort, so we can walk instead of take the elevator, because it's necessary for us to maintain our own physical strength and vitality. And so our planners oftentimes are way out ahead of us, and it's a wonderful thing to see that our government leaders are really kind of taking the bit in their own teeth and leading us by providing us with the programs and the facilities to really encourage bicycling. And bike lanes and some of these other facility developments are part of the nice legacy that they're creating for all of us. So I'm happy to be here, because what I want to do is to talk to you about the bicycle laws. in that the bicycle laws, while it's true that bicycles are vehicles and we have to follow the same laws as other vehicles, the bicycle laws are really kind of obscure and little understood even by us. And the reason is that when you go through like motor vehicle driving training and driver's ed, you don't really learn about the bike laws or the pedestrian laws. You really learn about the driving laws. So I'm not going to focus much tonight on the driving laws. What I'm going to focus on primarily are the traffic laws from a bicycle perspective. And in those laws are laws that are sort of nice because they give us some rights that maybe we didn't know we had, but there's also some real traps for you. So help me as we go along. If you see anybody here who doesn't have a book, make sure you get a book. They're off to the side. Come in, have a seat. Don't feel shy about it. The other thing is to please hold your questions until the end. We're really going to be done before 7. I'm going to stick around and answer any questions that you have. And inevitably, when you ask a question, it relates to something that I was about to cover. So, and if you don't mind, I think that it will be helpful for you if you follow along in the book. Why? Because if you look at the book, what you're going to see is that it actually contains the law. And it's not like easy speak, where we've interpreted the law for you. We do that too in the articles. But it actually contains the actual statutory text with all the grammatical goofiness associated with our state legislature's form of expression. The reason I did it this way is because it helps you to kind of go through it and maybe learn a little bit as you look at it as we go through. So please follow with me when we go through. And the other thing is that if you get into a debate with somebody about what the law is, the law itself provides a pretty good answer. So you're not talking about how, well, this person said it was this way or this person said it was a different way. You've actually got the laws there circa 2006, because this is the 5th edition of the bike book. So I hope that it's going to be providing you with a good and useful tool. The errata sheet is necessary because unfortunately my proofreading was such that one of the laws that changed in the last legislature did not get changed in the book, but I'll talk about that as we go. So we're going to talk about various sources of the law tonight. Part is going to be statutory. That's contained in the Oregon Revised Statute, which are called ORS. So if you want to know the lingo, so you can argue with a cab driver about what the law is, which the cab drivers are usually the ones who know the law best. If you know how to talk about it, a lot of times it adds force to your argument. So when you talk about the law, you want to say ORS beforehand. That stands for Oregon Revised Statute, and then the number of the law. And so then they know that you know, and you know that they know that you know at least how to describe it. And this is a distillation of the laws that are contained in the 28-volume Oregon Revised Statutes that occupies most of a bookshelf. So they're primarily laws that only apply to bikes in here, but I couldn't resist putting some others in too. The articles are ones that I've written over the years, and they tend to go in greater depth about some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. So if you have some questions that aren't answered, maybe the articles will help you. If you look on the errata sheet, you'll see on the back of the errata sheet that there's a whole lot of articles that I've written over the years, and these are contained on our website. And so if you don't see it in the book, if you go to the website, you may find me trying to hold forth about something else, because I am unable to prevent myself from writing articles on a regular basis. Many of them occur or are published in the Oregon Cycling, which comes here from the Center for Appropriate Transportation in Eugene, which is you've got a marvelous neighborhood facility here with the CAT, and I've been associated with Oregon Cycling for a large part of my legal career. I'm honored to be a part of that publication because it has been the voice of Oregon cycling community, and it's distributed statewide, and it's just a wonderful source of information. If you want to know about where the bicycle community is going and what's getting done in the bike community, Oregon Cycling is an excellent organization and publication. So let's go to the laws, and they start here on page 43. And if you look here, you'll see in the table of contents that there are quite a few laws, and these are not the laws that are in the rules of the road. These are specific laws that are devoted to bicycling. And let's just, if you don't mind following along with me, if you look at page 44, what you'll see is that we've included the fines for the various violations and the rules for sentencing on those violations. And I'm not going to talk about it tonight, but if you ever want to know what the rules are regarding citations, here they are. And those will be something you can use for yourself or your friends. You'll also see that on page 45 at the bottom is the statutory basis for the new Safe Routes to School law. And on page 46, you may have heard about it, is the actual text of the Safe Routes to School law. And it's such a kind of legal weirdo that it doesn't even have a statutory number. It's just floating out in the stratosphere somewhere above our heads as we speak. It's there, but it's really not contained anywhere, and it's kind of hard to find it, even though that it's effective. But it's going to create, we hope, a real change in community groups and schools, creating the incentives for having folks start riding and walking to school, because we think that that's important. There are also, if you look at page 46, 47, 48, a number of laws that are regulatory, and the one I most would like to talk about briefly is the article, or not the article, but the law in ORS 366.514, and it's a long one. It starts on page 47, and look on page 48, and then it continues on to 49. But this is the law known as the 1% bike bill law, which provides that 1% of state highway funds that are used for traffic improvements must go for bike and ped facilities. And this is a law that's a very important one for us, because when there are different projects going on using these funds, the 1% rule makes it so that you can, if you monitor these things, get a hold of the folks who are either the political leaders or the folks who are working to implement those plans, and find out from them how it is that they are taking into account the fact that the future of our culture is being steered by folks who are really thinking about us as a human race toward non-motorized transportation as something that's very important for us. And in fact, the law has some teeth in that it says that at least 1% has to go toward those facilities. So that's something that you can use your citizen advocacy skills, and we're putting together here in the next couple of months a statewide work group of folks who are citizens to take a look in their communities to see about these facility improvements to make sure that bikes and peds are taken into account. An important law that is something that you can actually use in your community is contained on page 51, and that's ORS 810.510. This is the law that a lot of folks don't know about, but up in the Portland area we've used very well, I think, to make it so that dangerous storm drains that eat the front wheels of bicycles up to the hubs sometimes are replaced. And that's because the law requires that storm drains and grates and covers must be designed in such a way that, if you take a look at paragraph 1, so that bicycle traffic may pass over the drain safely and without obstruction or interference. What that means is that they have to have cross pieces or collars, for example, where the storm drain has kind of been allowed to not rise with the level of the blacktop surface, because you know, as they raise the surface of the roadway with layers of asphalt, a lot of times the storm drain then sometimes is 2-3 inches below the surface of the roadway. It's easy for folks who know their way around the town maybe to ride around these things, but for visitors or novice riders, a lot of times those create, particularly at night, a real hazard. So you can use people's loathing of lawyers to get a hold of your maintenance departments and let them know that, you know, they may not realize it, but that actually they're violating state statute by allowing these dangerous storm drains on public roadways. And if somebody was to get hurt, they might get in trouble, and in fact they might get sued by some lawyer. And if the lawyer sued the city or whatever the county or state successfully, of course, we as taxpayers are the ones who would all pay for it. So oftentimes you can use that to sort of leverage an improvement, and in fact, we've seen maintenance departments be so responsive that they'll actually put yellow cones around these bad grates until they're able to send a crew out. And it's possible to put a collar around the ones that are actually have come to be below the level of the surface to raise the storm drain up so that it's even with the level of the blacktop. And that's a very good fix, and it works quite well. And one by one, you can make those bad storm drains go away, and it's safer for us. Now's a good time to do it in the summer, because in the summer they can do it so that when the rain comes in the winter, you can actually ride over those things. Not that you would necessarily want to ride over it, but you never know when you're going to get boxed in or have an emergency avoidance maneuver where you got to ride over one of these things, and you want to be able to ride over it even if it's kind of a hassle, because the fact is that you don't want to have a minefield in your regular commute home if you don't have to, and this law gives you the right to push for it. There's also an article about it on our website, and maybe even in the book, and a couple of sample letters that you can use, so hopefully that'll help you. On page 51 is another important law, and this one is ORS 811020, and this law makes it so that, and unfortunately bicycle riders are some of the main violators of this one. It says that if a vehicle is stopped for pedestrians who are crossing in a marked or an unmarked crosswalk, overtaking vehicles must also stop, or they commit a violation of this traffic section. So that means if you're sharing a lane or in your bike lane and a motor vehicle stops for pedestrians, you can't roll forward in the bike lane. You've got to stop as just like that vehicle stopped and allow those pedestrians to go. That's a nice one to help folks facilitate their getting across the road safely. Another one that is important is on page 51, ORS 811.025. This is the law that makes it a citation offense to fail to yield the right-of-way to a pedestrian on a sidewalk. And what this means is that when pedestrians are sort of at the entrance to like a shopping center parking lot, they're walking on the sidewalk and folks in the parking lot want to get out and go into the traffic. There's that little moment when you're a pedestrian or on a bike where you look at the car looks at you, and it's like, who's gonna yield, who's gonna go? Well, there's a lot of people who don't know it, but the fact is that the pedestrian or the bicyclist always has the right of way. The car must stop. And furthermore, another section of the law requires that a car also stop before entering and crossing over the sidewalk. So they're coming out of an alley or they're coming out of a parking lot. Before a motor vehicle crosses a sidewalk, they must come to a full and complete stop. Now, I have to tell you that was news to me, and I don't think I found out about it until a few months ago for some reason. I don't know why. Maybe I learned it and forgot about it. But you actually have to come to a complete stop before you cross over a sidewalk, before you enter the roadway, when you're coming from either a driveway or an alley or something like that. On page 52, is the new ORS 811.028, and this is the new one, and I say it with sort of some irony in my mind, because there is so much mutual confusion, ignorance, and distrust about the pedestrian laws in the state of Oregon now. The Oregon legislature in two successive sessions, 2003 and 2005, have changed the pedestrian yield law. And in fact, everybody's kind of got it goofed up and sideways with the school zone speed law. And so everybody's like not sure what the heck does the law require. Well, I'll tell you, it's very simple. And if you look at page 52 and if you look at page 53, you'll see that it kind of goes on and on. But it's really easy, and here's what it is. A pedestrian has the right of way in the crosswalk, right? A bicycle has the right of way in the crosswalk. And the motorist must yield to the pedestrian in the lane in which the pedestrian is walking or riding, and 6 more feet. So it's a lane and 6, and most lanes are 12, 14 feet. So basically what you do is you give the pedestrian about 18 feet. That's their zone of safety. And you may not turn until the pedestrian is out of that lane and has an additional 6 feet. So it's what we call it is a lane and 6. The way that the professional drivers are taught to do it is really 2 lanes, which is like 24 feet. But if you read the law carefully, it's a lane and 6. So what that means is that when you've got like pedestrians walking across a street that's like 4 lanes, and they step off the curb and they're walking, you don't have to stop when they're 3 lanes away. You only have to stop within 6 feet of the lane into which you're turning. Okay? There's a lane in 6. You got to give them a lane in 6. And if you think about it that way, it's really pretty simple. And hopefully the legislature is going to leave it, because folks need to learn it and then kind of be certain about and confident that they know how it works. And I'll answer your questions at the end if you don't mind. Another one that is something that is near and dear to all of our hearts is on page 53. And this is the law that requires you to yield to a bicycle rider in a bike lane. And for those folks arriving, yeah, get a book and an errata sheet. And we're on page 53. You know, there are so many times that bicyclists in bicycle lanes experienced car drivers not yielding to them. And it's almost as if it's like, it's true that like bicycle lanes are a new addition to the world of roadways, but the idea of yielding to a bicyclist in a bike lane is no different from yielding to a motorist in a traffic lane. So for example, when you're on a multi-lane highway, you don't go from the slow lane into the fast lane when there's a truck in the fast lane. I mean, not only are you not supposed to do it, but you don't want to run into them. Well, the problem is that when a motorist fails to yield to a bicyclist in the bike lane, it's not like running into a truck when they come over, because we're so light. So what happens is maybe we make a face or a grimace, but basically we slow down. If it happened a few times that when the news came on, that everybody in the city saw that today, out on a main street in Eugene where there was a bicycle lane, a minivan pulled into and in front of a speeding bicycle in a bicycle lane, and the rider of the bike, in spite of his or her best efforts, was unable to stop in time to avoid hitting the minivan. And while the bicycle rider was trying to stop the bicycle dragged the minivan 163 feet before finally coming to a stop, and the minivan was in a crushed ball of sheet metal. And all the news helicopters were overhead, and everybody was just averting their eyes. Oh, this was terrible. Another bicycle wreck where a bike hit a minivan. Everybody would slow down and yield to bicyclists in bicycle lanes. But unfortunately, the laws of physics are not on our side in that regard, even though the law is such that our relationship legally to the minivan when we're in the bike lane is really no different than if we were a semi-truck and they were a motorcyclist. But the fact is that on the street, the laws of physics sometimes take over. But recognize that yielding means that the motorist is supposed to drive in such a way that you do not have to slow down. So that means if they want to cut across the bike lane, what they have to do is pace you so that then they come in behind you instead of cut in front of you in order to plant their large vehicles on top of your bike lane. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, but that is the legal atmosphere in which we live, and also, unfortunately, the reality in which we operate. On page 53 is something that I alluded to earlier, and this is the law that makes it so that we have the right-of-way on sidewalks. So many times, bicyclists and car drivers encounter each other on sidewalks, and there's this like look back and forth, and the motorist, because the motorist has the mass, moves forward in spite of the fact that maybe the motorist knew that they were supposed to yield. But the law is that the motorist must yield to the bicyclist. The bicyclist has the right-of-way. On page 54 is the old law entitled Unsafe Passing on the Right. And if you, actually it's the new law. This is the new law that went into effect January 1, 2006. And while it may not seem revolutionary to you to know that you may pass when it's safe on the right, because around the world, the way that we work with the cars is that when the cars are going faster than us and we're sharing a lane, the cars go around us, and we let them go around us. And then when the cars slow down, such as a traffic light, and they're all backed up, we don't stop behind the last car in line and breathe the exhaust fumes. We ride up alongside to the right of the cars, watching for right-turning motorists or people who might car door us, so that what we can do is we all start together, and when the light turns green, and then we do that little ballet that we do where we all start together, but then they start going faster than us, and then we catch up, they catch up, back and forth, and it's just like kind of cooperating to share the roadway. It's the way it is everywhere. And it used to be in Oregon that you couldn't do it that way, but now, as of '06, we can. So here's the new law. You can also pass on the right to go around a left-turning motorist, and that's always been the law. And of course, what that means is that you can go around to the right side of a left-turning motorist, but you have to stay on the paved portion of the roadway. So when you're out on the rural two lanes, and you see these guys, mostly guys, I say, going off the road, onto the shoulder, gravel spraying all over to go around a left-turning motorist, that's against the law. You got to stay on the paved portion of the roadway. If you can't stay on the paved portion of the roadway to go around the left-turning motorist, you got to wait until they turn. The other thing you can do is when you're a left-turning motorist yourself, is the law requires that you turn left from as far to the left as you can. A lot of folks turn left from the far right side of the lane. They totally cork the road, and it drives people like me crazy. Why? Because we don't want to wait for you to turn left. We want you to turn left so that we can go around you and keep going, because why? We want to get to where we're going, just like you. Okay. Some people think it's there's something wrong with going around left-turning motorists, but that is not in fact the case. On page 55, ORS 811.440 is the law that tells when motorists may ride or drive on the bike lane. And bear in mind that it is correct there, if you look at it, that they can drive on the bicycle lane in order to turn, but only after first yielding to the bicyclists. And that's just what the law is anyway for lanes. I mean, any lane can be used by a person so long as they first yield to the occupant. And in fact, the bicycle lane law is a little bit restrictive. One of the things we're going to do is try to change it so that you can also use the bicycle lane when you're a motorist to go around another left-turning motorist, because why shouldn't a motorist be able to use the bike lane? In fact, a legislator's husband got a ticket for this, where going into the bike lane to go around a left-turning motorist when there was no bicyclist in sight. And sometimes, you know, there is within our community sort of a rabid streak. I mean, they're my people. I'm part of this sort of group, I guess. But they kind of look at vehicles in bike lanes as trespassers. And so sometimes they say to me, well, what can we do? You know, if you look on bike lanes that are on the inside of corners, you'll see that the bike lane lines are rubbed away by motorists who are cutting the corner and going into our bike lane. You know, but we don't want speed bumps or those little, those big bumps to keep them out, because then we hit the bumps and we fall down. What should we do? And what I say is this, is that, look, if there's no bike riders around, why do you care, right? If you don't want the motorists to use the bike lane, you know what you can do? Fill the bike lane with bicycle riders. Let's get it so full of, when there's a bicycle rider, they don't come in the bike lane. Let's get some more bike riders out there. But let's make it so that the fluid and dynamic sharing of the roadway is what we try to encourage. Because if you go to Europe or to third world countries where even more people are non-motorized users of the roadway, you see that there's like this kind of seamless cooperative attitude between people with donkey carts, people leading water buffaloes, people with wheelbarrows, people who have like crutches walking, people with carts that are carrying these huge loads, bicyclists, big trucks, buses, and there's hardly any traffic signs. Why? Well, because in the third world countries they can't afford traffic signs, and in the first or second world countries of Europe it's because they kind of have this different mentality where fewer rules is better. And so they develop this cooperative attitude such that what happens is that they don't have all these stop signs and yield signs. What they do instead is that they approach these like roundabouts and these different intersections that they have with the cooperative attitude to let the slower people have a little bit of space, but to go around them. And that's what we, I think, would advocate, what we need to have in the United States, is a cooperative attitude, a fluid and dynamic sense of the roadway, such that, for example, how many times have you been riding on your bike when you have seen a motorist who, while there's not enough road for them to safely pass you in the lane, and it happens to be a place in the road where it's a no passing zone, for some reason, they feel that they cannot lawfully, apparently, cross over the center line to go around you. So they're behind you and they're like angry and they're just behind you. There's nobody coming on the other side. They could easily go. Well, the fact is that the Oregon Vehicle Code, it's an elegant piece of work. It allows that if there's a condition in your lane or an obstruction in your lane that makes it so you have to cross over the center line, even in a no pass, you can do it. So if there's a bicyclist up there, and in order to give that bicyclist sufficient room so that you don't buzz them, if you have to cross over the center line, you have the right under the Oregon Vehicle Code to cross over that center line to give that bicyclist plenty of room. So those of you who are car drivers, I'm sure you see that all the time. What you can do to the other car drivers is to show them with your own behavior relative to bike riders by going over the center line and giving those bicyclists plenty of room. And it's kind of funny. You know, you can conduct kind of a little psychological game with humans. I love to do this myself, and here's what it is. When you've got a line of cars passing a bike rider, right? You see the people in front of you with varying degrees of begrudging nature in terms of giving space to the bike rider. You can kind of see, well, you can even kind of think about it. Is that a liberal person or is that a conservative? Are they libertarian? What's their moral stand? I don't know. Political? Is there a conflict? What are they? Because you can see how much room do they give the bike rider, right? But when you go around the bike rider, give the bike rider plenty of room. Be very generous. Now look in your rearview mirror. And it's amazing, you know what? Unless it's like somebody who's really got an attitude. It's like for 2 or 3 cars, you giving that bike rider more room influences the people behind you. No kidding. It's like, oh yeah, I guess we give bike riders room now, huh? Okay, so they do it too. And then after like 3 cars go by, then they're back to whatever they were before. So you can influence the way people treat bike riders. And that is the way that I think we're going to change the world. I mean, hopefully. On page 55, also at the bottom, ORS 811490. This is one of those little jewels that's in the code that a lot of people don't know about. It's what makes it against the law to car door a bike rider. And in almost every case that a car driver doors somebody, the first thing out of their mouth is, "What the hell? You weren't paying attention." Well, excuse me. The fact is that the law requires me to ride as far to the right as practicable, which is what I was doing. And buddy, the fact is that maybe you checked your mirrors, but you didn't do a shoulder check, and the law places on the motorist the requirement that they not open their car door if it's going to interfere with either bicyclists or pedestrians. No kidding, it's right there. The law is clearly against somebody who opens up their car door into traffic. So the fact is that at least in this one little area of the law, it is very clear where their rights are. And we've got these cards that we pass out that are called bicycle rights cards. I didn't bring them with me, but if anybody wants them, you can sometimes get them in the bike stores. And they clearly talk about this, and there's also a article in the book about it, which really lays it out. But unfortunately, that's one of those areas where ignorance of the law makes it so that car drivers kind of feel like when they throw that thing out and open, that somehow it creates some obligation on the part of people overtaking to avoid the hazard that they are illegally creating. And it's upside down thinking, but fortunately in this case the law is on your side. On page 56, ORS 814.400, this is the law that makes it so that you are vehicles. What that means is that you can get a speeding ticket, you can get DUI, careless driving, reckless driving, anything that by its nature logically applies to you is a vehicle is going to on your bicycle. What that means is that when the law says that vehicles must yield to pedestrians and crosswalks, that means you too. You must yield to pedestrians and crosswalks. And some of the worst offenders, in fact, are bicyclists. Why? Okay, well you tell me. Why do you think you're on a higher moral plane? Because you're human-powered than somebody who's using fossil fuel. I don't know. I mean, maybe you are, but the fact is you're still a vehicle. And so you don't have a right to, fail to yield the right-of-way to a pedestrian in a crosswalk just because you're on a bicycle any more than any other vehicle. And I have to say, I don't know why it is, but when I'm on my bike, I tend to maybe be a little more begrudging with stopping than when I'm in my car. I'm not sure why, but I do that little game with pedestrians too. If I can make it that the pedestrian doesn't take the step off the curb into the street because I look like I'm really in a hurry on my bike, I'm fine with that one. Why? I don't know. It's part of my defective character, and probably yours too. On page 56 is a trap, and I've tried to, along with the BTA, to change this law so many times, so many different ways, and we've been unsuccessful, so you better know about this one. First of all, you know, we've already talked about it, that you got to yield to pedestrians on sidewalks. But you can still pass them because you're going faster than they are. But when you do pass them, the law requires that you give an audible signal. Now, maybe you've got a bell, or you say, excuse me, on your left, whatever, but you must give the pedestrian notice so that they have the opportunity to realize that they're about to be passed. If they stagger or fall and you fail to do it, you're going to be found legally responsible for their injuries. So you got to make that part of your riding behavior. The other thing is that this is the law that has the terrible trap in it. And if you look at paragraph 1D, what it says is that you lose your right-of-way on a sidewalk or on a crosswalk if you operate faster than a walking speed. Walking speed's about 3 miles an hour. It's terrible. So what it means is that when you're going at a safe speed on a sidewalk and some negligent motorist bumps you, if you're going 5 miles an hour, you're going to be likely the one to get the ticket. Why? Because you were going over the speed limit. And it also means that if you're with your kid who's on rollerblades and your friend who's got the jog stroller, even though you can go 5 times faster than them probably, they can go faster in the crosswalk and still have their rights of way as pedestrians than you on your bicycle can. So it is discriminatory against bicyclists. Social policy is that cars should not have to watch for things going faster than a walking speed in a crosswalk, which is a place historically used by pedestrians. So that's it. We're going to try to change the law, but that is where we're stuck. So be careful, because when you're going to assert your right-of-way in a crosswalk on a sidewalk vis-a-vis a motor vehicle, you got to be going 3 miles an hour. So it doesn't mean you have to go 3 miles an hour all the time, only when you're about to have an encounter with a motor vehicle. On page 57 is a typo. The new ORS 814.420 is different from this because we changed it. The old law used to be that once you got in a bike lane, you were kind of kidnapped by the bike lane. You could never get out. There was no provision for any way to leave it. But the new law is contained on the errata sheet, and you can kind of clip it because it's something you can clip, snip, and paste and put on the old one. But the new law, which we wrote, says that you can leave a bike lane when there's an obstruction or there's a hazard. I mean, if you're younger than 20 years old, you can probably read this with your glasses off. But for those of you who have aged lenses, you're going to need to put your glasses on. But it's right here. It's the new law. And we wrote it, so it's pretty good. I mean, it allows you to pass a vehicle or a pedestrian, to go around glass, to go around somebody who's blocking the bike lane, or to turn left, because a lot of times what you want to do is you don't want to turn left from a bike lane on a multi-lane one-way street. You want to move out of the bike lane, get to the next lane, get to the next lane, get to the far left lane, then make your left turn. So what this does, it allows you to do legally what you have probably been doing all along anyway, but now you can do it legally. And so this is the way that we judge the worth of our lives, is by working on this. It took us 10 years to get this law changed, and but we did it last year. And it was effective January 1, 2006. On page 57 is a law that ORS 814.430, which sounds like kind of a negative, improper usage of lanes. But really, if you carry forth onto page 58, you'll see this is actually what I call the Bicyclist Bill of Rights in my little parenthetical on the side. And the reason is that it was written by bike folks. And what it is it contains our right to the road. And so what I'd like to do is just run through with you what our right to the road is, because few people understand it, but it's a really significant power. And it is this: you've got a right to take the whole lane and ride two up, side by side. Now, I'm not talking about where there's a bike lane. I mean where you're sharing the same lane as the motor vehicle traffic with them, so long as you don't slow the traffic down. So if you're riding at the speed of the traffic, you can take the whole lane and ride two up, side by side. However, once you get to the point where you're slowing the traffic down, then you have to go single file and ride as far to the right as practicable, which really just means practical. Or if it's a one-way, as far to the left as practicable. So you can go to the right or to the left. And if you are in a situation in the lane where something happens, such that there's an obstruction, there's glass, there's a pothole, there's a car, where it may be that a motorist is about to get out of the car and open their car door, there's a kid playing with a dog on the median strip without the dog on a leash such that the dog might run out, any of those conditions which make it so that you're not safe alongside the right-hand part of the roadway, you can move out and take the entire lane, but only for so long as the hazard exists, and then you must move back over to the place that is as far to the right or left on one way as is practicable. So that's a significant power. You cannot do it in front of a truck going 55 miles per hour and make them lock up all 16 wheels to avoid hitting you, and you must signal to let them know you're coming out. But if it means that they must slow down or stop in order to allow you to do that, they must do that. You've got a complete right to the entire lane. You also have a right to move to the left of the lane in order to make a left-hand turn. So you make a left-hand turn, not from the far right, but you go out to the center just like everybody else and make your left turn, even if it means that folks behind you must stop for you the same way they stop for a school bus making a left-hand turn. You've got the same legal rights, okay? So now, there is a requirement apparently in Eugene which requires that, in fact, you not ride more than single file when there is somebody 100 feet behind you, even if you're going at the speed of traffic. So that is somewhat of a conflict with the motor vehicle code. I did not include that provision in the bike book, but it's in your city code. And where there's a provision that's more strict in the city code than in the Oregon traffic code, I'd like to say your thing is preempted here in Eugene, but I'm afraid that the law is that, and it would be used against you by a lawyer, such that if there's a vehicle within 100 feet of you, you've got to ride single file and as far to the right as practicable, even if you're at the same speed in the city of Eugene. But absent that, and away from the city of Eugene, you can do what I said. The other thing you can do is you can ride on the sidewalk or in the street. You know, as bicyclists, we're used to like having people say, well, if you're in the street, you should be in the sidewalk, or if you're on the sidewalk, well, you should be in the street. Well, the fact is, we can decide whether we want to do one or the other. However, in the urban core areas of cities, including Eugene, you cannot ride on the sidewalk, and I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. At the bottom of page 58, ORS 814.440 contains the requirements for turn signals. You got to use them for 100 feet. It also requires that you signal stops. The thing is that car drivers kind of are afraid of us, believe it or not. They kind of look at us like urban deer, you know. You never really know what they're going to do. You come up to them, they go left, they go right, maybe they jump on the top of your car, who knows what. They're those bicyclists, you know. Well, the fact is that if you signal your intentions, it really gives them something to predict and move around. So it allows for that nice cooperative spirit. So use your signals, and you can tell it allows you to not use the signal if you got to have both hands on the handlebars to shift or use your brakes. If you look at the statute right here, it takes into account the fact that you cannot have your arm out all the time when you're having to slow down and shift at the same time. Sometimes you've got to go back, take care of your business with your bicycle, and then you can resume your turn signal. But the turn signals, while some young men think they're too cool to use turn signals, the fact of the matter is, if you want to extend your gene line, young men, use those signals, believe me.
Do you think car drivers know what turn signal can signal?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's really, well, I don't know. I thought it was part of our human instinct now that we know about it, but maybe not. But those signals are really important and important to use. The next thing to think about is on page 62. Oregon's bicycle equipment laws require that bicycles use a light on the front during limited visibility conditions, ORS 815.280. Very important. That means that you got to get that light on the front. And to the rear, though, you can use a red reflector. You don't have to have a light to the rear, but you must have a red reflector. Now, you talk to anybody who looks like me with, an older person, And they're going to tell you should have a red light to the back as well, but a red reflector does satisfy the law. The section that begins on page 65 relates to sidewalks. And if you look, you'll see that Eugene is covered here on page 68, as well as a number of other Oregon cities. And we laboriously checked websites out to assemble this, because these, unfortunately, are not very well signed in the cities where people really know, who are from away, where they can and can't ride on the sidewalks. And so you know, this is something that hopefully will help you. And unfortunately, the people who tend to get cited are people not who are the folks with suits on, and that's a shame. You also have on page 72 a section about miscellaneous laws, and now I wish I would have put in there that law about the Eugene 100-foot rule, but I did put the your parking restrictions, which are pretty general, and they're contained on page 72. The paragraphs and sections on harassment begin at page 77, and these are ones that I'm not going to talk to you about much tonight, because fortunately for us, harassment of us as bicyclists by motorists has gotten to be a whole lot better than it used to be in the old days. But what I'd like to tell you is that there's a whole section on it that we deal with, and it gives you kind of a recipe guide on what to do about it, and also some sample laws that might be used by you if you ever have to go through this process. And in the BTA in my office, we can help you if you ever do get harassed. But what we do is we teach that when you want to have kind of a zero tolerance toward harassment is in the following circumstances. Not when somebody's like impolite to you or like stupid and then insulting, when they cut you off and yell at you or give you the finger or are belligerent or pull up alongside you and yell at you. Those are not times to go after them and prosecute them. It's when they do these things. It's when they ever throw something out of their car at you, even if it's just a water balloon or an egg. Because if it hits somebody else, the next time they do it, and they will do it again, in the back of the head, it may cause them to veer out into the traffic and get killed. And that person won't be able to get a license plate number. So get the plate number and the make of the vehicle if they ever throw anything out of their vehicle. If they ever touch you or your bike, if they ever like pat you on the fanny, they might think that that's kind of cute and funny. But the fact is that the next time they do it, the differential of speed between them and the bike rider might be such, or the bike rider might flinch, cause a terrible accident. So not funny, not okay. You want to get them, call 911 on those folks. Or if they ever are in a situation where they make you think, or try to make you think that they're either going to hit you or they're going to run you off the road, definitely not okay. That is like rough driving, and you absolutely got to do something about it. And before you ever call the police to try to complain about a situation where somebody is like merely like dumb to you or mean or ignorant or bad-mannered, recognize this. Our law enforcement in the state is so taxed by the fact that they don't have enough money and they've got overwhelming caseloads, that the police officer that you interrupt to complain about the car driver that cut you off and gave you the finger is really probably thinking about the violent residential burglary that went bad last night, and if they're going to do something about it, they got to do it now instead of talking to you bike freak who's complaining to them. So you should get out of their face and let them get on with their work about something that's really important. And if you think about it, and if you were in a position to vote, I bet you would vote to allow them to go take care of their business instead of helping you process your upset over the fact that somebody was mean to you. Really, I mean, think about it. What's important here? And so what you want to do is to save your use of the law enforcement resources for times when it's really bad. And those do happen sometimes. And when that happens, what we have now is a situation where law enforcement's a lot more receptive, because we kind of pick our shots, really. So if we go after them, we really go after them. But we don't really, like, cheap shot it, you know? And I think that they really appreciate that. So that, hopefully that section that we've given you is a good one. There's another section that I just want to talk to you about, and it begins on page 85. It's called Citizen-Initiated Prosecution, which is kind of a weird little name. But what we found, actually the traffic police helped us find it, is that there's a little-known section in the law which allows a citizen to initiate a traffic prosecution even without a police officer. And the recipe is contained in the book, and it's this wonderful Oregon statute, ORS 153.058. And so actually what you can do is prosecute a driver for failing to yield. You can use traffic court. The resources of the system are yours. And if you sustain a conviction, it's the same as any other conviction, as if a police officer had initiated it. The record goes on the person's permanent Department of Motor Vehicle driving record as a moving violation. So if you ever think that you might want to take things into your own hands, you oftentimes will find that there are not sufficient law enforcement resources to begin a prosecution, but you can do it yourself. So take a look at that. It's also contained on our website. We've got a little red pamphlet that I created of this. It's called the Action Pamphlet, and you can print it as a PDF file from our website if you want. And you can use it as sort of a community incendiary device if you've got a particular driver who's a harassing person, to use, the laws against them in a good way. And then, from a lawyer, there's the typical stuff you'd expect from a lawyer, what to do if you're in an accident. And so that begins on page 91. And I hope that those things are helpful and that you never have to use them, but they are there. And it's, I'm not even going to go into it. I spend most of my time now telling people about how they don't need lawyers, really. Because when you get in an accident and you get hurt pretty bad on a bike, you've got lawyers like sending you refrigerator magnets, sending you police reports, offering to mow your lawn. Really, when you need a lawyer is when you can't afford a lawyer, such as when you've got an accident that results in property damage. Then you call a lawyer, and it's like you've got a sexually transmitted disease. They don't want to talk to you. Well, the reason is that the lawyers make their money by a percentage of your recovery. So you've got a $200 bicycle property damage case. Well, for 1/3 of that, $70, there's no lawyer that's going to want to deal with that. So what I did was I decided, okay, well, let's create the definitive explanation of what the law of property damage is, so you can do it yourself. So if you look on page 97, what you'll see, and this is used by the insurance companies, the bike shops, everybody now, you can use it yourself if you ever need to. This is the law about property damage, what the law in Oregon is, what your rights are, and how to process it. So if you ever have a property damage claim, don't give up, because unfortunately the system is set up in such a way that those people who kind of give up do not get justice. You got to hang in there. It's designed to weed out those people who just say, oh, to heck with it, So it's important for you to hang in there, because why? I'll tell you why. Look, we're bicycle riders. We're entitled to a fair measure of recovery. Just because it's a bike, not a car, doesn't mean that we should not get a fair shake. And the bike shops will work with you, give you written estimates, so let's do it. And the fact is that the way things are going, bicycles are almost as expensive as cars anymore. So, sometimes there's a fair amount of money involved. On page 101 is accidents and insurance. Now, I am no friend of insurance companies. I sue insurance companies. So they see me as sort of, maybe not they don't really like to see me coming a lot of the times, particularly since I've been doing this for so long. And what I do is I tell people to tell the adjuster that they talked to me, and that I told the adjuster through the person that if they don't deal with the person well, that the person's going to come hire me to sue them. And so I do that. I've been doing that for such a long time that sometimes the adjusters are positive, but sometimes they're negative. But the point of it is that insurance is important for all of us, because the fact is that every single one of you in this room who has car insurance probably doesn't realize it, but the insurance you have on your car covers you on your bike. And you've been buying bicycle insurance as a part of your car coverage since you've been buying it. So I want to tell you very briefly about it. There's 3 kinds of insurance. There's liability coverage, which is what you all bought insurance to have. That's where you make a mistake and you hurt somebody, and now they've got money to draw against. That's your insurance. But there's 2 other kinds, and both apply in bicycle cases. The first is PIP, PIP, personal injury protection. It's no fault. It means that if you're on your bike and you run a stop sign and plow into the side of a car door of a poor innocent car driver and break your collarbone, your PIP and their PIP, even though it was your fault, pays for your medical bills and your wage loss and other expenses associated with your injury. Why? Because it's no fault. You've had it all along. And if your kid on their rollerblades fails to yield to a vehicle in a darting out incident and gets hurt, it covers them too. It covers all those expenses. So be aware of that, PIP, PIP. And the text of the law is contained in the book. The third area is UM/UIM. This is really important. Uninsured, underinsured motorist coverage. And what it provides is insurance as a part of your car policy, so that if you get hurt by somebody who has no insurance or not enough insurance, you can make a claim under your policy for your damages as if there was insurance under your policy. And the reason that that's so important is because if you get really whacked by somebody, oftentimes that person is somebody who's on drugs, driving a stolen car, no driver's license, no insurance, and they have absolutely nothing that you can draw against to take care of your damages. Well, your UM/UIM makes it so you can make a claim under those circumstances against your own insurance policy for the policy limit. Now, unfortunately in Oregon, the policy limit's $25,000, which is about a night and a half in the hospital. But you can raise the policy limit of your UM/UIM to like $250,000 for barely more money than the legal minimum costs. And by doing that, you make it so that at least you know when you climb on your bike and go for a ride, that if something terrible happens, at least you're not going to be a drain on your family and friends. You've done what you could to insure yourself. And the nice thing about it is that when you go to raise your rates, you call your insurance person tomorrow and say you want to get $250K for UM/UIM, the insurance agent is going to say, oh, well, you're not a bike rider, are you? Well, let's see, if you're a bike rider, how many miles a year are you riding on that bike? Maybe they want to take that into account. No, they don't do that. They don't ask you that question. So the fact is that if you're a very active bike rider, such that you're out there all the time on the road, it doesn't make any difference to them. They look at your driving record in determining what your cost of additional insurance dollars is going to be. And those additional insurance dollars are an excellent deal. Now, you probably didn't think I was going to say that. In fact, that is a very important thing for you as bicyclists, that you get that coverage increased so that it's available to you. And then finally, I hope in the book that it's helpful. We've included the regulations that govern the insurance companies, and that's at page 111. And these are the things that govern the agents so that they have to make correct representations about fact. They have to answer questions within 30 days of correspondence, and if they fail to do it, then you can complain to the insurance commissioner of the state of Oregon. And the text of the law is contained in here. Not that that's ever going to happen, but it's just nice to know that you've got it available to you, because sometimes people feel that once they enter that process, things get difficult for them. There is one area that I have not told you about that I want to take you back in the book to tell you about before we end. And that's contained at page 23. Now, this is not an ORS. This is a different type of law. It's an OAR, Oregon Administrative Rule. And this is the law, OAR 734-20-0045, which governs where we can ride on freeways. Because we have a right to ride on the freeway, even though you can't hitchhike on the freeway or be a pedestrian on the freeway. And it's a good training tool for many people who are trying to get a low, kind of a high-speed, low number of intersection type riding experience, training for triathlons or that sort of thing. And our right to the freeway is something that we hold on to and hold valuable. And so you'll see here that there are places where you can't ride on the freeway, but that by and large you can ride on the freeway anywhere in the state of Oregon. And I just want to let you know that, because one of the things that those of us in the bike advocacy community think about is that we want it to be that we have the right to ride where we wish. If indeed our planners and our folks in government do not want us to ride in a particular place, what we want them to do is to not make it an illegal act for us to ride there. We want them to create facilities that make it so we don't want to ride there. create a way for us, a bike lane, a beautiful off-road designated place, or a nice arterial for us so that we don't want to ride in the place that you don't want us, but don't make it so that it's a violation of the law for us to be there. And for those of us like me, what we do is we spend some of our time resisting, or at least letting our voice be heard, so that when, for example, in Oregon, the Oregon Department of Transportation that we work closely with, they're our sister organization on a number of important bike rights projects, decided that maybe we should make it illegal to use the bike route that exists alongside the Sunset Highway in Portland by prohibiting bicycle traffic on it. Those of us in the activist bike community took that very seriously, and we made sure that we were heard and forced them to reconsider that, because we felt that if they didn't want us to ride alongside the Sunset Highway, they should create a better venue for our riding. Don't make it illegal for us to go there. So I appreciate you coming tonight. I'll be happy to stay here and answer any questions that you may have, and I hope that this is useful for you and that you are safe on the roadways. Thank you for coming.
Ray, you got a question?